Here's a hot take that I think a lot of people are actually taking right now. I don't think talk therapy is enough because at this point, a lot of us are really dysregulated. And I feel like that's kind of something that a lot of people are starting to acknowledge now, that therapy is still so important. I still think we should really have someone that we can talk to, especially if we don't have anybody else. But if you are like me and you're feeling like it's not enough, you're not crazy and you're not too far gone, and it's not such a problem. Like, that seems to be kind of normal, and that seems to make sense because you can only change your brain and your beliefs so many times, but how does it actually translate to your trauma responses and to your body? So the other day, I was getting kind of triggered in therapy, and even though that can be helpful, I realized that it was actually probably not the most efficient way for me to heal. And again, let me just put a disclaimer. I think it's really important that we talk things out in therapy and that we become really aware. However, it is important to realize that talk therapy can only take us so far. And this is really hitting me right now. And it's because I have really understood how neurodivergent I am and how kind of trauma informed I am. And also, there's a combination of reasons why we can feel dysregulated. So that could be because you're neurodivergent. That could be because you have a lot of trauma. That could be because you have a lot of health issues that are causing brain fog or whatever. So there's a lot of reasons why our minds can feel super imbalanced. And I think, for me at least, I'm someone who's just so obsessed with my own mental health. So I dig into and try to analyze what's going on and like what my trauma is and stuff. But there's a certain point where I think my body just needs to start feeling safer instead of going into a loop, and instead of trying to fix my thoughts, like think better thoughts. And so I found in my therapy appointment, like, there were points where I was really angry and I really wanted to express it. And my therapist, well meaning, kept stopping me, and she was like, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think you're wrong. But it was kind of like a positive explanation for why I was wrong. And I kind of like, after the appointment, I was sort of like, am I wrong or bad, or should I feel shameful in the fact that I don't think that that was helpful? Like, isn't that weird? Like, if you feel frustrated at your therapist, aren't you going to turn around and go, oh, there's something wrong with me? Or there's something I'm in denial about? Or, it's always my issue. Or like, I messed up again. And I've kind of realized that I don't think that shaming ourselves into anything is ever going to be sustainable enough for us to heal. And I realized that as much as it feels like, I'm asking to be babied or to be handled more softly or in a way that's even what people might consider too weak or something, like, I think that I've kind of hit on the fact that, like, just telling me what to do and who to be and why I'm wrong is ultimately not going to help me heal. That's probably how most of us have been told to live our lives anyway. So I think even if it's not intentional, a lot of talk therapy can be so much advice that maybe our bodies and our body chemistries aren't ready to receive yet, just because we have this barrier of not feeling safe. We don't feel safe enough to take in that information and really wire it in and recondition ourselves. So I was thinking about, like, what is it that I wanted from therapy? What is it that I wanted my therapist to do instead? And yeah, there was a piece of it where it was like, I just want her to validate me, you know? And again, if you're wanting that in therapy, it might be confusing because it's like I can't just expect somebody to tell me what I want to hear. But when I dug into it deeper, I realized I know that what I'm feeling, because I was feeling a lot of anger, a lot of like leftover anger towards certain relationships in my life. And I really wanted to express all my frustration, almost just be so unfiltered about it. And I realized that, like, even though in general, the things that I was thinking, like, oh, this person's horrible, or like, I never want to be around them again, or whatever, even though the things I was thinking was kind of extreme and not exactly true, my body felt like it was true. So that's really important to understand. No matter how much something is probably outlandish and you're overthinking it, or you're blowing it out of proportion, or you're creating, like, what is it, catastrophizing something. I understand in our brains that's not true, but whenever we say that, whenever we think that, whenever we get into those modes, our body 100% believes that it is being attacked, or it is whatever the catastrophe is, they think the body believes that it's feeling it. And in my experience, when my body is told that what it's feeling is not correct, it feels more confused and it feels like it's actually being attacked more. And so that's why I don't feel like just telling someone to stop feeling crazy, essentially. I don't, that's like whenever someone's mad and it's just like, you're crazy, or just stop. Or whenever you just tell someone, calm down, the person's like, no, like, how can I? And it's because your body believes these things to be true. Your nervous system believes these things to be true. And so, kind of invalidating that, even in the most well meaning manner, doesn't always translate to the goal of what you want that person's body to feel. So, what's really interesting is lately I've started getting into coaching, and the way that I've been doing it in my program is actually different from traditional talk therapy. So there's so much emphasis on letting someone hear themselves, and also feeling into their body. And this I found was like the key, like, important missing piece of actually how I can truly start to heal and regulate my nervous system. Like, I think it's valid actually that someone's body and nervous system is catastrophizing, because no matter how much you're telling your brain not to do it, your body and how it feels will always re-trigger and make your brain start to get into those modes. So we really have to address how we can make the body feel safer. Because I think personally that you're not going to rewire and recondition better thinking, like better thoughts and positive thoughts and more helpful thoughts, until someone feels safe and grounded in those thoughts. If they were told you're supposed to be confident or else you will be attacked, then they will probably not feel confident about being confident. Like, something that has really been coming up for me is, what's really funny is, like, it's almost like I feel too stubborn to step into my confidence, into my full power. And I was telling my therapist this, and something that I realized after the session was that I think before, when I was being encouraged to be confident, it was in this way of like, be confident or else, or you're going to be bad. Or it was like I was just being shamed into that. And the people who I saw that were quote unquote confident, which ends up being arrogant, they tended to be the people that made other people feel bad. So I just had this warped association with the word. And even though mentally I always knew it was wrong, I always knew that there was a healthier way to be confident. And I didn't have to just shame myself into doing it. My body always associated that. It always got anxious. We have to recondition our bodies to feel safe, like in tandem with the new belief that we want to wire in. And it's so funny because, like, my therapist was like, again, really well meaning, but she was just like, but do you understand that what you're saying isn't true? And I was like, so I didn't say this out loud, but I was thinking about how I was like, what are the other tools we're gonna use here? Like, what are what are we gonna like? What is the part where we change, where we like address the trauma? You know, like, or is it just kind of this? Are we just gonna be like, hey, that thought is wrong? You know, like it doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people online, and like there's an influencer I love named Erin Dowdy, and a lot of them say similar things. And Erin Dowdy has said like the only way that you can really like heal is in the presence of an empathic person. And what makes sense is like you're only going to feel safe enough when your body feels safe enough and calm enough to take in like a better feeling thought. And so that means when you're in therapy or when you're in sessions where you are intentionally wanting to improve, that other person that's supposed to facilitate that growth needs to be open to you, needs to understand your feelings, and it needs to hear what your body is saying. I think I think a lot of, again, I don't want to bash talk therapy. I'm just saying the incompleteness of just that. Also therapists use other tools. So, I just think we're focusing on the talking part not being effective, right? So, I I feel like in the coaching practice that I'm in now, it feels like there is this part of it where we intentionally have someone go into their bodies and talk to their bodies. And that is really important because, again, your mind can do whatever it wants. If it doesn't translate to your body, then that means you guys aren't really communicating. You guys aren't really simpatico, you know? So we got to get you simpatico. And I feel like in order to do that, like what we're doing in coaching is allowing yourself the space to feel safe enough to talk to parts of your body, you know, or talk to things like your inner child, or like some form of version of like how to talk to the parts of yourself that feel unsafe, because there's obviously sort of the miscommunication happening. And what I found is like in therapy, I realized that that was what I was looking for. Like I was looking for someone to help guide me to talk to the part of myself that was feeling fear, you know, and to really hear that part of me out. And also, as a neurodivergent person, I have found that, you know, oftentimes we get the same sort of advice that a lot of neurotypical people do, where it's just kind of like, oh, you should organize yourself. You should prioritize your tasks. You should generally be organized because you're not being organized. And it's like, yeah. You mean I should have a brain that can do that more easily, don't you? Isn't that what you're saying? You should like not be neurodivergent and that would help you. Like that's essentially what I feel like whenever someone's giving me advice. And for me myself, I'm somebody who is constantly trying to work on herself. So whenever I hear that, like I'm like I know it's well meaning, and sometimes like honestly, I'm not perfect. Obviously, I'm not always doing those things, but it just makes me feel like the sort of, what's the term, the executive function to be able to do those things more easily. As much as I've tried to make that work for me, I will often burn out really easily, or I will get really tired. Like I'm someone who's always been really ambitious, who's always had a lot of ideas, who's always wanted to push herself to work hard and to be successful. And I have, to the point where I get burnt out. And I'm always like, I can do this. You know, where another person just kind of keeps going. And then I'd always look at myself like, oh, there's something wrong. Like I keep having to prove that I can work hard, or I keep having to prove that I can express myself and that I'm smart or whatever. But in reality, it's that my neurodivergent mind can only do so much and can only push itself so much within the confines of a neurotypical world. And on some level, it's not that bad. But when you think about how much us neurodivergent people have always had to try that much harder, or have always tried to adjust or like work or like do things beyond their normal brain chemistry and how it fits, like it ends up being that we are gonna feel dysregulated anyway, because we're always gonna feel like we're pushing too much, and we're gonna feel slightly unsettled, and we'll more likely have this even like perfectionism, like where we're trying way too hard to control it as well. And it's really frustrating because, again, if you're like me, a lot of us don't lack ambition or the intention or the work ethic. It's just our bodies aren't catching up. And so, in that sense, as neurodivergent people, it is actually even more important that in therapy and in sessions like coaching or wherever we want to heal, it's really important that we address the body in those sessions, that we talk to our bodies, that we kind of dip into what actually feels like the best way of working, what feels like the best way of enacting our ideas, like what is the best way to think, what is the best way that we want to express ourselves. Like, I think for me lately, I've been realizing that I tend to do well when I can like have a huge burst of ideas and then like kind of stop myself and then like kind of go on and off that way. Sometimes I need like huge sort of feelings, idea dumps. So a crazy ass person thing that I do is I will often, whenever I have time, whenever I'm on a long drive or something, like I will voice note to myself whatever I'm trying to process, just because I think my brain right now wants everything to happen at once. And like I'm giving myself an opportunity to do that whenever I kind of like mind dump and like voice note. You can also journal to do that. And ideally you can do some version of that with your therapist or coach or somebody or with a friend. But it does feel like I can't I can't train my brain to become neurotypical. You know what I mean? Like my brain will always be more well suited to being very stimulated. But that's why it's also gonna be good at, for example, I always go back to like, I really wanna, write more, or like I love watching movies, or like I love playing music, because those creative things are automatically ways where I can like be overstimulated and put it all together into a bigger picture thing, and where I can also deeply feel it. And I know for me, like that is the yummiest sort of body, to put it in yoga terms, that's the yummiest position for my body and my brain to be in, because that is what it's made to do. And having to not be overstimulated and having to sort of do things in a much more regulated way doesn't really, like, I can do it and I know I'm supposed to do it, and it's fine, because we can't always do exactly what our brains want either. But God, like I'm just not, for a lot of us neurodivergents, it's really also, I'm not using my brain to its potential if I'm not allowing it to use the overstimulation for something. Because otherwise it keeps defaulting to everyone thinking like, oh, they just get overwhelmed so easily. Oh, there's just something wrong. When in reality, you have, like, I don't remember if I said this already, but like movies. I saw Thunderbolts like recently, and spoiler alert, but I think if you know some of the characters that are in it from the poster, then a couple of them have had the super serum, and like they kind of talk about that sort of thing in the movie. And it just kind of feels like, imagine that you had injected in you the super ability to think a lot and to make a lot of connections, but you were put in a world where you couldn't use that, but you couldn't turn that off. So that's essentially what neurodivergence feels like to me, at least. And it's like I have what I will put, and I know I'm kind of like making this maybe I'm just hyping this up way too much, but like I have what I feel like is a super fucking brain. Like I have a brain that just keeps going and wants to keep going, and that's really important for something. you know, and we keep thinking that that's a problem or that we have to calm it down, which you should, but we also just need to use it in the spaces where it could be helpful, because at the end of the day, I also, even though I can sound like a crazy person, like, it's so easy for my mind to be like, I want to do all this thing, like, and in some ways that actually is just, how I would have probably liked to live if our society allowed us to, but anyway, anyway, so in terms of therapy, again, it feels like it's important in that and coaching to really listen to our bodies, because at the end of the day, that's the thing that's actually fucking us up. That's the reason why we're in therapy, because we can be so intelligent, but like, we can also just feel so conditioned in our bodies to be reactive. And so, yeah, all this, all I basically wanted to talk about today was just like, the way that you actually regulate your nervous system is if you create spaces of safety. And I've kind of talked about this before. Like, I think I had a video where I talked about like different things that I use, but these things really help. Like, if you are in an area that has like sound baths or something, or meditations and stuff, like, I know those are all the things that like most people kind of turn to, but really, like, is there a way that you could also associate that with like whatever you're doing? Like, there is a time where I would be playing meditation music and high hertz music while I was, like, I don't know, doing red light therapy. And then I was thinking about how, like, maybe if I feel really stressed whenever I'm doing something, maybe I can play meditation music at the same time and kind of recondition, my association with that thing. So that's probably a jump. But anyway, I was just thinking about how, like, yeah, I do feel like the other thing is being in environments and spaces with people who are compassionate. Just being in the energy of safer people makes you feel safer. Not having to over explain yourself is and not feeling like you're walking on eggshells. Like, obviously that's going to make you feel safer, but it's really, I feel like it's, for me, I've kind of underestimated the ability of just how being just in the presence, not even always interacting with those people, but being in the presence of people who are safer actually helps. So there was a moment that I had last year where I was so frustrated, and I kept being like, I hate people, or like, I just want, more nurture, or like, I want people who will just kind of like, be more nurturing to me. And then fast forward to this year, and I realized like, oh, I found a program that does exactly that. Like, I got into a coaching program, and the fact that the method was all about sort of nurturing, being in the body and being kind of feminine with it, that is what I have been missing my whole life. And I will just say, like, just being in the presence of those people, or just being on a live call, even if I'm just listening, but when I'm seeing their faces and their energies and the intention in the space, that has made so much of a difference to me than when I've actually talked about my problems with a therapist who tells me to correct me, who tries to correct me. Like, like, I have felt a lot more seen and heard just by being in the presence of people who understand me, as opposed to when I'm with a therapist who understands but is just pushing me to change. It's so odd, but I think, again, it's more that your body needs to feel like it's safe. So in what ways, in what areas, and what times does your body actually feel safe? And when does it feel safe to be itself? When do you feel the safest to express yourself? When do you feel like you don't have to try too hard? And when do you feel like you do? And during the times where you feel like you've done something wrong, or when you have to shame yourself, or you always have to guilt yourself, or whatever, like, what is the thing, like, what are the things that you feel like you needed instead? Like, that might be hard to answer, but for me, I just know that I eventually arrived at I needed more listening and nurturing and body safety. And that typically is the answer in some ways for all of us. I will say this episode was so difficult for me to record because I feel a little bit all over the place today. And I realized that like I could not really make myself or force myself into being more organized in my thoughts. I could only calm down and anchor myself in the feeling of what I wanted to express. So, for example, I asked ChatGPT to make an outline for this episode. I also wrote an outline. I also wrote myself notes. I also journaled beforehand. But I think what really gets me anchored in is sort of like grounding. But part of that grounding is kind of getting really grounded in what is the feeling or what is the like core like message that I really want to say. For me, I was just noticing that it was a lot of frustration and kind of seeking justice for myself, like being really understanding of myself. Like I noticed that I started to feel more in flow today once I started to understand my frustration rather than push it down. So that seems to be the theme here. Again, you're not going to regulate your nervous system by telling it to regulate. like you kind of need to hear it out as if it's like your inner child or as if it's another sort of being or as if it's something that is, which in reality it is, where it's like your body, it's talking to you and it won't shut up till you actually hear everything it's saying. Okay, anyway. So I'm a little bit still all over the place, so I understand. Also, it's Gemini season, so I feel like my brain is extra like woo, you know. But yeah, I again feel like in general, if you are feeling like I have been in any which way, just know, of course, you're not crazy. There are better ways to use, you know, your super soldier brain or whatever it is. And, you know, you're allowed to, and you're supposed to, and the solution is to feel safer. Okay, well, until next time, peace and love, bye.